Right on, I'm a recovered alcoholic. My name's Tony.
Hi, Tony.
I'd like to welcome everybody Wednesday night Big Book Study Workshop with the program of recovery outlined in our basic text. How we open this meeting tonight is with the Serenity Prayer. What do we need for a good meeting? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So if you're new to the workshop, what we do here is we go through the program of recovery outlined by the first 100 men and women. In the back, there's some worksheets to get you involved and get you caught up. Even though we're on the fourth step, we cover all the information. That way nobody gets left behind. And when you do those sheets, you can ask people questions if you don't understand what's happening in there or want some clarity. And that lets us know and yourself know whether you're catching the information or not. Tonight we're on the fears, but we're going to cover some information. Tonight we're going to do something a little different. I'm going to ask some questions, and as I'm asking them, you just write down what you think or what you believe the answer is. And then I'm going to cover what the answer is, and then you'll be able to see for yourself whether you understand what's happening here, right? And what's happening through. How many people's heard or read how it works here? So we go through that format in this group, right? And that's what the basic text is designed for. There's a lot of misunderstanding what this whole thing is about, and you hear a lot of different dialogue in the fellowship to what things is, what things isn't. Anybody been to a topic meeting? You sit in a topic meeting and everybody's talking about how they're fixing themselves with themselves, and that's not the design of this thing, right? So a lot of people really don't understand the mechanics of this or what this is all about. So we're going to cover that information. And hopefully, if you kind of understand, it's like anybody ever walk through a mall and see one of those travel agencies? They have different pictures on the window to entice you of a possibility of traveling somewhere and what's there when you get there. And that's kind of like the understanding. Once you understand this, you understand why you need to do it and what it looks like when you get there and the results of it when you end up in that location. You should end up in the place that you hoped for when you started it, right? It's like when you went into the travel agency, you said, man, I'd really like to get here. You go talk to the travel agent, and they'll do everything necessary to get you there. They'll put you together an itinerary, and if you follow that, you'll end up where you hope for. If you don't end up in that spot, how would you know that? It won't look like nothing that you look like in a brochure, and that's kind of like recovery. A lot of people don't understand the basis of recovery. So when they get there or they don't get there, they don't know it, right? So with this book is really cool. If you're new and you read it, it'll tell you one of a couple things. One, can you drink safely or not, right? If you're a potential alcoholic, it would be nice to know whether you can get away with drinking, wouldn't it? Right? And what it looks like when you can't get away with drinking, and the solution that they found the difference between an alcoholic and a non-alcoholic. A lot of people don't know the basis of what alcoholism is. They're mistaking it for behavioral problems. So this clears up all that information. And by the time you get to step 3, you make a decision whether you need to carry on with this course of action or not to bring about the results as discussed in step 2, or the travel agency, right? Is kind of you make the decision, do I need this solution or don't I? So what happens is, when we go through this, they talk about, we're going to look at something really interesting here. And we're going to look at on page, cheating today, 42. So when you look at 42, we're going to build up to where we are. So where we are in here, and more about alcoholism, what do you think that chapter is about? Yeah, it amazed me too when I found that out. So it's more about alcoholism. So they're going to talk more about alcoholism. So in order to talk more about something, you'd have to understand the basis of what that conversation is. So when they describe alcoholism, what are they describing? What an alcoholic is, right? And so what are the 2 symptoms that makes a person an alcoholic? Write that down. What are the 2 symptoms that make one an alcoholic? So when they kind of describe that, if you're looking for a cheat kind of sheet there, and you want to know it, and they talk about that on page 30. They describe it by saying most of us have been unwilling to admit we're real alcoholics. So they're making a classification. What's a real alcoholic and what's not an alcoholic? if you did a survey this week and started asking people what an alcoholic is, most people don't know how to answer that. And that's people within our own fellowship. They have no idea what makes them or somebody an alcoholic. So this basic text is to inform and comfort those who may be afflicted. So not only for the alcoholic, but people who may be associated with somebody with a drinking problem, you could better understand why they do what they do. Right? So what's the first symptom in alcoholism? Is the allergy. So what does that mean? The allergy means that when these people drink, what happens to them that doesn't happen in a normal temperate drinker? They trigger the phenomenon of craving. They get thirstier. Anybody get thirstier here when they drink? You're not finished the first drink. What are you thinking about? The next drink. How many people are like that here? How many people are under the idea if you open a bottle, you finish a bottle? No such thing as tomorrow, right? I'll have another. What does every drink really taste like? Tastes like another one, doesn't it? Okay. Regardless of what it tastes like. So here on page 42, from page 30, right, that we just looked at more about alcoholism, to page 33, they talk about the allergy part and really comprehending what that is and conceding to your innermost self that you have this symptom, right? The phenomenon of craving when you drink. When you understand that and you concede to your innermost self, that means you concede that you can no longer safely drink alcohol in any form whatsoever. Is that what it means? So if you can't safely drink alcohol in any form whatsoever, that usually means that when I drink, there's consequences. Anybody here because of the consequences of their drinking? And that's what most people think. I'm an alcoholic because of the consequences. No, you're an alcoholic because of the allergy. And if you can't control the amounts you drink, can you control the outcome of the stuff you do? So you're always going to do stupid stuff. Anybody do stupid, horrific stuff here while drinking? So if you can control your drinking, would you be able to control the outcome? Yes, but if you can't control your drinking, can you control the outcome? So when they talk about the great obsession of the abnormal drinker is to control and enjoy their drinking. Has that person done step one yet if you're still under the delusion that you could control and enjoy your drinking? So they don't understand alcoholism or they haven't done step one. So the obsession is in association with controlling and enjoy your drinking. Right? If you're obsessing about drinking, you still think in some form or another you can get away with it. Anybody? So once that idea is smashed, would you still have an obsession with the idea that you could control and enjoy your drinking? No. So that's the first step in recovery, right? The delusion that we're like other people presently maybe has to be smashed. Who does the smashing? We do. We do the smashing based on truth. Right? Do you need a psychic change or spiritual experience to come to that conclusion? No, that's the beginning of step one. It doesn't mean you can stay sober. That's the hard part. Most people, when they do step one, they're under the delusion they can stay sober. So that's why they spend from page 33 to page 43 explaining the second symptom in alcoholism. They spend 11 pages. It's the second most talked about symptom in this text. 11 pages to try to get you to comprehend the second symptom of alcoholism that they describe on page 23, and that is what? The malady that centers where? In the mind, right? And they describe it, the best way they describe that is on page 37, when they describe this thing, and it's the most blunt way they could say it. There's no other way of talking about this thing, right? So they say whatever the precise definition of the word may be, and we'll finish reading that, they're giving an example of somebody who wasn't able to stay sober on themselves with their own experience. They had the thought crossed my mind, it was a good idea to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk. As an observer, would you think that's crazy? He thinks it's a good idea. And it's such a good idea that he ends up getting rid of the milk. Right? Okay, so they're giving a summary of this kind of behavior, this kind of symptom, or this kind of thing that's exhibited with people with the problem of alcoholism, whatever. You want to hit us with that?
Sure. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. How can such a lack of proportion of the ability to think straight be called anything else? Keep going.
Oh yeah, why stop now? They're on the hook.
You may think this is an extreme case. To us, it is not far-fetched, for this kind of thinking has been characteristic of every single one of us.
Not some of us, every single one of us have exhibited this symptom if you're a real alcoholic. If you're a potential alcoholic, you won't understand this. If you've just had the obsession and able to stop on your own resources or your own experience, you won't understand those who have come into the fellowship who can't get sober based on their own story, why they keep relapsing. You'll be kind of baffled why these people keep on doing it, because you don't understand it at the same level that these people are. See, people give people the impression that Alcoholics Anonymous is designed for people who can stay sober. But it's actually designed for people who can't stay sober. Right? Even in our literature, it says if you're of this type, we doubt you can stay sober. But good luck. They even talk about the experiment of quitting for a while might be helpful. But let us explain this to you, why they call it an experiment of quitting. Why do they call it the experiment of quitting? Because you're going to start again. It's an experiment. Good luck. Have fun. How many people has relapsed here? The experiment. You see, but how many people told themselves why they relapsed is because something within their control. They tie an excuse to it. So now I'm still not beyond human aid because there's a reason I relapsed 4 times. I got 4 different excuses for my last 4 relapses. So have this person done step 1 yet? Because they don't understand what the problem is. So if you relapse and you've done step 1, you know why you've relapsed now. And why have you relapsed? Because of the malady. That's the promise of step 1. You're going to continue to relapse in spite of your position or understanding of it. Step 1, you can't see, feel, and touch. Right? And that's what they're going to get into here.
We have sometimes reflected more than Jim did upon the consequences, but there was always the curious mental phenomenon that, parallel with our sound reasoning, there inevitably ran some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink.
So what's a phenomena? Curious mental phenomena. Unexplainable event, but we want to explain something you can't explain. And you're trying to understand something that's unexplainable. You try explaining that to a normal person, the stuff you've been doing. The more you explain it, the more they got to go. Oh, look at the time. Right? You explain it to one of us, we go, oh yeah. We laugh. You know, you people are laughing. There's identification there. It's like, yeah, we understand each other. Normal people look at us like there's something wrong. Yeah, there's something wrong. Okay. Phenomena, unexplainable events. So how would they explain an unexplainable event that keeps on happening to us? If it's unexplainable, how do they explain it? They give you pictures what it looks like. The guy putting an ounce of whiskey in his milk. That's one. The other guy, not a cloud on the horizon. Things were going fantastic. As he crosses threshold for the dining room for dinner, the thought crosses his mind, it'd be nice to have a couple highballers and end up in the puzzle factory again. That's the truth, but we don't see that. All we see is the ease and comfort by taking a few drinks. How many people look back on their relapse and go, what was I thinking? How many people around you asked you what you were thinking? And what was your answer? I don't know. Okay. Phenomena, unexplainable event that happens in people like us. Yep.
Our sound reasoning failed to hold us in check. The insane idea went out. Next day, we would ask ourselves in all earnestness and sincerity how it could have ever happened, or how it could have happened.
How many people ask themselves the next day, how can this stuff happen? That's why we need to tie an excuse to it. Because if we don't know why it happened, now we're in trouble. But if we have a reason why it happened, we're not in so much trouble, right? Does that kind of make sense? So that's why we really conceding to this thing is really hard. So this guy we're going to look at on page 42. Let's say he's been to a couple meetings. He understands alcoholism. He understands he can't drink again. They've explained to him the malady that centers in the mind of a real alcoholic, what a real alcoholic mind is. He's under the impression that he don't suffer from that because he's able to keep himself sober for a couple weeks now. People said to him, hey, you know what, you want to drink? No, I don't want to drink. He doesn't want to drink again. And he doesn't see him ever drinking again based on how he's feeling and his understanding of his problem. He doesn't believe he's in this class of beyond human aid. So they try to talk to him about it, and he's kind of like, no, I got this. I'm okay, right? So if you talk, we're going to back up on page 41. And he just relapses again. Now he's going to explain it, right? As soon as
I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over that evening in Washington. Not only had I been off guard, I had made no fight whatever against the first drink. This time I had not thought of the consequences at all. I had commenced to drink as carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale. I now remembered what my alcoholic friends had told me, how they prophesied that if I had an alcoholic mind, the time and place would come. I would drink again.
So that means if you had this symptom, right, you're going to do it again. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do it again. But if you have an alcoholic mind, that's why it doesn't ask you what you think and how you feel about it. It doesn't ask you. So when you hear people say, oh, the obsession is left, I don't want to drink, they don't understand alcoholism. What they've just deluded themselves in believing that this change has happened, so they really don't need to get to the steps. Because I asked myself, self, what do you think? Do you want to drink? No, I don't want to drink. Right? That's not one of the questions, is it? So going back in your history, how well have you been able to keep yourself sober based on all the excuses and conditions so far? How well have you done? And 3 months is not a success story. Oh, well, you hear people, I had 3 months before. Well, if you're looking for 3 months, you just do what you did the last time. Right? So this guy is baffled at the idea that he drank it, but now he knows why. He says, my friends told me, like we're having a discussion right now, the promise of step 1 is what? We're going to drink again 100%. Not maybe. It's just a matter of time. And you may be able to stay sober for months or sometimes years, given good reason, but there will come a time where you'll be without defense against if you're this type of alcoholic. So you need to know what type of alcoholic you are. In order to know that, you need to go back in your drinking history. How well have you done so far? But we say, well, this time I mean it. This time it's different. Yes, it's different. Yes. And it'll be different the next time you're coming back too. Sorry.
Continue.
Yeah. Before it turns into a lynch mob. Starting to get those looks. It's the book saying it, not me. Well, you didn't have to mention it twice. Okay, go ahead.
He had said that though I did raise a defense, it would one day give way before some trivial reason for having a drink. Well, just that did happen and more. For what I had learned of alcoholism did not occur to me at all. I knew from that moment that I had an alcoholic mind.
See, very specific, an alcoholic mind. Where did they start describing this symptom? Where's the first place they actually made clear reference to it? It was on page 23. The doctor made kind of a reference to it, talked about this thing that happens in their mind. To the alcoholic, their life seems the only normal one. He talks about this desire coming back again, and they drink, and it is repeated over and over until these people experience an entire psychic change. There's very little hope of their recovery. But he notices once this change has happened, right, what change? The psychic change, their spiritual experience, these very same people who seem doomed, right, are able to control their desire for alcohol. So what a lot of people in AA do, and it's a really misleading thing, they give you the impression that you're not going to think about it again. That's a lie. I'm 30 years sober. The other day I was sitting on the couch, I woke up, I'm doing my morning meditation. My wife left a little bit of wine left in the glass. And my mind went, boy, wouldn't everybody be surprised if I ended up drunk, right? And I kind of went, what the? And I go back to my meditation, right? I take the wine, go pour it down the drain. It's just crazy thinking. I think about it every now and then. I'm driving in my car, I smell somebody smoking a reefer a couple cars down, and I'm like a dog with his head out the window. If I could get that in incense, it'd be great, right? It's just a part of the mind, but I'm able to curb it based on truth. And based on my spiritual condition, I just realized it's a thought. It's nothing. It's just something. They talk about that in step 10. When tempted, we recoil from it like a hot flame, so long as we're spiritually fit. But if we haven't had the psychic change or spiritual experience, what is the likelihood of our survival in those continued situations? It won't happen because we still have an alcoholic mind, right? So when I go through this process, or when they went through this process and had the psychic change or spiritual experience, write this down. Do they still have an alcoholic mind? Yes or no? Don't say it out loud. So once you go through this, are you still suffering from alcoholism? Once you've had a spiritual experience or psychic change? Yes or no? Ready for the answer? The answer is no. Because if you're still suffering from alcoholism and you have an alcoholic mind, what are you going to do? You're going to drink. That's why these principles are designed for our living problem. Once you have the change, alcoholism is removed, the problem is removed, it doesn't exist for us anymore. That's the whole purpose of doing the steps, is to have that problem fixed or removed or corrected in step one that's killing us. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, make the correction in our brain. That's why they talk about we have a daily reprieve contingent on our spiritual condition. If I maintain these principles that keep me connected to a power of source, then I don't have to worry about alcoholism returning. If I stop working these principles, what returns? Alcoholism. And when alcoholism returns, what's the first symptom of it? The insanity, which triggers the allergy. Does that kind of make sense? So this guy here, let's go on.
I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help me in those strange mental blank spots.
Anybody convinced of that now, looking back on your story? How well was self-will, right? And your knowledge of you was able to help you, right? Anybody thought this is not a good idea and did it anyways? How many people didn't even really think about it? How many people thought about it after you took the drink? This is not a good idea. And your body says, keep it going. We got hospitals and jails to visit, buddy. It's the same. We have the same, we're on the same kind of path, but it's two different stories. It's like traveling down the same street with two different experiences. Like when you're sober and go through a spot check, right? They go, hey, where are you going? You say, I'm going to a meeting. I'm going here. When you're drinking and going through a spot check, they go, where are you off to, sir, tonight? Looks like jail. Right? It's same situation, two different experiences. Anybody kind of relate? Okay.
I had never been able to understand people who said that a problem had them hopelessly defeated.
And there's people in AA like that. Just stop from starting. Well, that would be a good idea. How do I do that? Because I forget not to start when I start. Just remind yourself you're an alcoholic every day. How many people want to spend the rest of their life with that life sentence? So what happened? I forgot to remind myself. So that's all self-based recovery. It's already doomed to failure if you're alcoholic, right? He talked about this. He didn't understand how a problem could have him licked. Now that he's experienced that again, he kind of, whoa, I understand what you're talking about. That's why they say, to see if you're one of us. They explain this condition. That's why they say the experiment of quitting for a while might be helpful to see if you're one of us. But let's help the reader better understand what they're up against. And then you can diagnose yourself whether you have this problem and whether you need a solution. Does that kind of make sense? Mm-hmm. So they explain alcoholism. We need to understand alcoholism from whose point of view? Theirs. Whose understanding of step one do we need? Theirs. We need to be part of the collective. It's not my understanding of step one. It's their understanding. It's not my program. It's their program. Your program isn't designed to be successful. Why? Because it's based on you. Who's the problem? You. And if you've come up with it, it's going to be painful. Sorry.
I knew then it was a crushing blow. Keep going.
Well, here's the good part.
Two of the members of Alcoholics Anonymous came to see me. They grinned.
Anybody grin at you for a while? Hey, good to see you back. How you doing? And then we go, I never really did the steps last time. We go, no. You're the only one surprised with that statement. We know you didn't do the steps the last time. How do you know? Welcome back. It's the most consistent thing said to people who haven't done this. Welcome back.
They grinned, which I didn't like so much, and then asked me if I thought myself alcoholic and if I were really licked this time.
So what's the only two questions you're asking yourself? How many questions are there in step one? Two. One, when drinking, can you control the amount you drink? Yes or no? No. And now that you want to stop, can you stay stopped based on your own experience? And if the answer is yes, you wouldn't be here on a Wednesday night. You'd be at home laughing at people going to meetings because only alcoholics go to meetings.
Sorry, I thought there was three parts, three questions.
Oh, what's the third one?
Can you quit on your own spiritual basis? Going back.
Well, there's two symptoms in alcoholism, right?
Yes, the allergy.
So what is the two symptoms?
The allergy and the malady.
That's it.
You said what are the two questions?
That's it.
Okay.
To be your alcoholic, right?
Yeah, to be an alcoholic. Okay. No, I
Yep.
just want to
Okay.
confirm that.
Okay, go ahead. So that's what they're talking about here, right? They're not talking about the solution yet, right? Okay.
I had to concede both propositions.
2, right?
Yeah, both.
Yep.
Good thing.
They piled on me heaps of evidence to the fact that an alcoholic mentality, such as I had exhibited in Washington, was a hopeless condition.
What would they be heaping evidence on? What would they be talking about? Is the symptom of the inability to stay stopped. Like, if I was talking to someone, I would be talking about the time I was at a meeting. I told these people I was going to a party, and some of the people who didn't understand alcoholism said, when you go to this party, just hang on to a ginger ale all night. And if anybody asks you if you want to drink, just say, no, there wouldn't be enough for both of you. Anybody ever been given that advice? Hang on to a drink and all this stuff to curb alcoholism? I can't be the only one that said, if you go to a bar, make sure you hang on to something, make sure you drink. Right? So your self-based solution. So all night I'm telling everybody at this party, making sure everybody knew I'm drinking ginger ale. We like to do that. We walk around with our glass a little higher. Ask me what's in the glass, ginger ale. Normal people don't do that. It should be on the 20 questions, right? When you're not drinking, you feel it necessary to let everybody know in the whole party that you're not drinking, right? So all night people are asking me that. It's 11:15. I'm sitting in the chair because there's no one left to explain that I'm not drinking to. So I'm sitting there drinking my ginger ale in the mug. And the guy comes home from afternoons. He sits there. He goes, hey, how you doing? He introduces himself. I said, good. It's his place, his party. He goes, what are you drinking? I said, I'm drinking ginger ale. He says, oh, you want a beer? I said, no. If I started, there wouldn't be enough for both of us. He says, I got 6 flats in the back. I guess there would be. Right? No defense. All of a sudden, suddenly the thought crossed my mind, there would be enough for me to drink here and you. And I started drinking. I left that place 5:15 in the morning with 2 beers in my hand. How many times been like that? Time after time after time, sitting there drinking a coffee, like that guy with milk. My birthday, I'm not drinking. The waitress says, you want something for your coffee? No. Okay. Anybody have that kind of thinking? Yeah. So if you've exhibited that kind of thinking in the past, that's what he's saying here. What's the likelihood of you exhibiting in the future? It snuffed out any idea that he'd be able to keep himself sober under any and all conditions. You hear people say, we don't drink under any and all conditions. If you're able to do that, then you wouldn't need to do this. We drink under any and all conditions. Anybody drink here under any and all conditions? We don't even need a condition to drink. Anybody? Am I alone in that? So can we stay sober under any and all conditions? Not without this course of action, right? So that's what he's getting here. He says it's just a matter of time before this phenomenon in my brain takes over and I'll drink again. And I won't see it coming. Yay, so what step is this? That's what we're explaining here, step 1, okay?
They cited cases out of their own experience by the dozen. This process snuffed out the last flicker of conviction that I could do the job myself.
Being convinced, right?
Then they outlined the spiritual answer and a program of action, which 100 of them had followed successfully.
What step is that? 2. So they're outlining the solution to step 1, right? They're explaining what the solution is, like Ebby did with Bill. Remember when Ebby was sitting with Bill? Ebby explained this change that came over him through a course of action. Then he asked Bill to choose his own conception of what he was talking about. He didn't ask him to choose his own conception. You hear people say, oh, it's as I understand him. Then why do they have a whole book explaining it if it's as your understanding? Then why isn't your understanding working for you if it was your understanding? You need to understand what we're talking about to get access to this solution that we have. If you want what we have, you need to understand what we're talking about. And step 2 is the solution outlined from 3 to 12. Step 12 is a confirmation of what step? 2. Right? Because step 2 is the solution of what step? 1. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result, not a result, the result. There's only one purpose for doing the steps, and to have that change. Because if you're alcoholic and don't have that change, what's your fate? I'm going to drink again. So the most important thing that needs to happen in my life is that psychic change or spiritual experience. The same thing, a change sufficient enough to bring about recovery from alcoholism. Right? Okay.
Though I had been only a nominal churchman, their proposals were not intellectually hard to swallow, but the program of action, though entirely sensible, is pretty drastic.
Okay, and we'll find that out. Okay, so we go through this process. So when we get to page 54, they talk about here, and you can read it later, why we can't really change ourselves or find real happiness, or why we keep on ending up in the same situations over and over and over again because of our belief system. So a belief system is where you spend your ideas and energy. A lot of people say, I don't have a belief system. You do. The things that you think about on a constant basis that you tie energy to is your belief system. You're preparing yourself and believing things that are going to happen, and you're creating your reality around that. Anybody spend a lot of time believing things that aren't happening? That's your belief system. You believe that this is going to happen. And when you spend all that energy on it, how are you feeling? Exhausted. And then when stuff happens, how many people say, see, I told you? It's self-prophecy. But what happens at a subconscious level, we are being directed and governed by thoughts, ideas, and emotions what determine who we are. So all my past experiences are determining how I feel, think, and react to life. Right? Unless that changed at a core level, what is the likelihood of me recreating my life? I'll be in constant fear, tension, and anxiety. Anybody under constant fear, tension, and anxiety? That's an instinct-based life. How long can you stay like that before the insanity of the first drink returns? Some people, and what happens is some people never shake that and they end up offing themselves in recovery. Because they never really experienced recovery. They experience abstinence. And if you experience abstinence and you're an alcoholic, your life will start getting worse. But you'll pretend it's getting better. You'll come to the meeting acting like everything's okay, and then you'll leave here and go off yourself. Happens all the time. Right? We're chameleons. Any chameleons in the room? You hear something really good at one meeting, you're sharing it at the next meeting. You're living somebody else's recovery, hoping it comes true for you. Right? It's like sitting in the airport, right? You don't have a plane ticket to go anywhere, but you're surrounded by people. Some of them are going somewhere, and some of them have been somewhere, and you listen to all these people. You go, wow, that's really cool. And then you talk to the one person, they explain the trip, and then you talk to another person that's been there, and you kind of talk about this other. Then by the third time you talk about it, you're giving people references on what restaurants they should go to when they're there. You act like you've been there. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. You should really hear it next time you say that. We think not. You're right. Okay. So then we get on to page 50. So we're going to back up for a second here. And we're going to look at page, when we get into this thing, which is pretty wild, is, and we agnostics, when they get to this page, and it's kind of like 45. What do they say our dilemma is?
Lack of power.
Why is lack of power our dilemma? The basis of it is if this was a behavioral problem, you'd be able to change it. Because it's not a behavioral problem, it's an illness that centers in our mind, and it's beyond our scope of reaching on our own accord, that we can't create the change necessary to bring about recovery, lack of power to create this change. Obviously, right? So we had to get this power. Where and how are we to find this power that creates this change? Came to believe that a power granted ourselves could restore us to sanity. Where do we find this power that I need to get access to, that these people have incorporated in their life as a solution? Where do I find this thing that these people have? Why don't we read it?
In the book.
Lack of power.
Lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how were we to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. That means we have.
So that means, basically, if I just do what they've done and understand what they're talking about, so I need their understanding what they're talking about in order to incorporate that within my life. And so where and how do I get access to this power, what they're talking about, is on page 55. We've covered this in great detail, so we're going to get in the basis of this before we get into step 4 here.
Actually, we were fooling ourselves?
Yes.
Actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God.
Not some of us. Every single one of us. So they're going to explain it in such a way where it makes sense to you that you can go, oh, I have this thing. I understand what you're talking about. I've experienced it. It's always been there. This life force, this thing within inside of me that's been trying to get my attention, that's always wanted better for me. This thing that's always questioned me in those moments. You ever have that thing inside of you ask you what you're doing? And you talk to it, I don't know. That's what they're talking about, this life force. You ever come to it and says, there's got to be something different for you? That's this thing. And if you're able to home in on that and live by that thing, you think your life would look the same as what you're trying to get away from. It would look way different, right? So, we're going to go to page 63. It is getting hot in here now. So, page 63. 62, 63. They talk about on page 62 is the human condition. We get the human condition mixed up with alcoholism. You hear a lot of people say, I do this because I'm alcoholic. No, you do this because you don't have the living skills necessary to handle it in a mature manner. That's the truth, right? We pay the rent, and we come to a meeting, everybody applauds us. You're supposed to pay rent if you're living in that apartment. We pay bills, we want everybody to congratulate us. Anybody? We've been sober a couple months, we want to put it on a resume. So anyhow, so we're an extreme example of self-will run riot. And here they talk about driven by 100 forms of fear and self-delusion. If you're being driven by 100 forms of fear and self-delusion, who's the only one that don't know it? That's why we don't ask you too many questions. One, do you have this problem? Yes or no? Maybe we'll get back to you and we need to explain it better. Two, do you believe this solution will work for you? Yes or no? I don't know. Well, let me explain the solution better. Yes, I believe this is the solution to this problem. Do you believe that there's a power greater than you will solve your problem based on our demonstration of this thing in our own lives? So we are demonstrations of what this change can do for people who suffer from this illness. That's why it doesn't say, do you understand what we have? Do you want what we have? We were like you. We understand the condition you're suffering from. We're no longer like that based on this course of action. When the two people visited that person suffering from alcoholism, they explained the problem where they understood, and then they outlined the solution. And he says, it's tangible. I can see me doing this. Right? So step 2 isn't about your belief in God. It's about a belief that there is a power greater than you when you get access to can create this change. Our more religious members call it a God consciousness. That's why it says God is, we understand him. It's a collective. We all can agree on it. There's no argument in it. It doesn't create, that's why I don't introduce myself as a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu. It doesn't matter. That's secondary. It's like if we were sitting around this table and we started talking about relationships, and there was some people from the Middle East, and there was Christians, and there was priests, and there was lesbian couples, there was male couples, and heterosexual couples, and we started talking about our ideas about relationship. How well would this conversation go at this table? It'd be really crazy, really fast, wouldn't it? But if we talked about the basis of what makes a relationship, then we could all agree on that and start from there. And that's kind of like what they talk about on this solution. That's why they spend all that chapter, we agnostics, explaining it in the back of the spiritual appendix. Right? So when we sincerely took such a position of making a decision to follow through with this thing, this is a summary of the outcome of this, having had a spiritual awakening. So these people were living on page 62. They seen they couldn't make the change or necessary to bring about the experience that the people presenting them with this solution did. So they realized if I did what they did, like Bill did with Ebby, and with Ebby did with those people that came and suspended his sentence, talked to the judge about suspending the sentence, everybody has the same story. Every single one of them did this course of action and got access to a power that created a change that they talk about in more the spiritual appendix in the back of the book. They say every single one of our members, except in a few rare cases, have tapped into this inner resource of strength. Where's the access to this change? Inside. Right? So it's an internal thing. Right? Isn't it? Mm-hmm. And they all agree on it. So here's the summary.
When we sincerely took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed.
Didn't happen. followed. When we did step 3, the promises follow after the course of action. It doesn't happen at step 3.
We had a new employer, being all-powerful. He provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well.
Which would be these principles and staying connected to source. Where's the source? Inside, in your consciousness. Anybody know when they're feeling really good, everything seems to be good? You seem a little more easygoing, right? When you're spiritually based, you're more connected to everybody around you. And when you're more instinct-based, you're separated and in anxiety and flight. When you're instinct-based, you're in conflict with you. You have a frequency inside of you, or fight or flight. You just something don't feel right. Anybody have that feeling? It's just something ain't right. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on, because you're instinctual based. You're problem oriented. Your brain is fixated on every single thing that could go wrong or what has gone wrong. Anybody have that kind of thinking? And you're anticipating in shit that's not even happening, but you're getting ready for it. How many people got that? How many people have arguments with people that aren't there? And then they show up and you finish the argument. They're wondering what the hell you're going on with. You know what I'm going on about. No, I don't. No, man. Anybody have that argument where you involve somebody that you've been talking to all day, but they don't know it? Okay, so that's what we're talking about. Okay.
Established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. More and more, we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life.
Well, is that a shift in thinking? Right? So you're not living on so instinctual base. You're not on living the promises of page 62 by a self-directed person. You're now getting access to something, and then they'll clarify why is it that something is changing.
As we felt new power flow in.
What's our dilemma? Lack of power. So when you get access to the source that you already have within you, and you start living by that, how's your life going to start looking?
Good.
Pretty good, right?
As we enjoyed peace of mind.
How many people like some of that on a constant basis? Isn't that what it's all about? Peace of mind? You hear people say, I'm so happy. Well, tell your face. Sorry. You should inform your face. Okay. Sorry.
As we became conscious of his presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter.
Yeah, we're not fear-based anymore. Isn't that cool?
We were reborn.
So step 3, a lot of people, this here is an idea. It's an idea that I hope to achieve through going through the course of action. Step 3 here, this thing is a summary of the 12 steps. Because if I could achieve this in step 3, would I need to do the rest of the steps? It's an idea, right? That I could formulate this relationship to bring about this change that these people exhibit in their lives, that this power, this source, this course of action made possible. And they rely on it. And they wouldn't live without it any more than air. They've experienced something that's like beyond anything they've ever experienced. And when they're not connected to it, they know it. Right? And it's kind of like you hear people say, it's not about the steps. Everybody talks about the steps. If you're talking about the steps, you're not talking about what this is about. Right? Why did we drink? Because what were we looking for when we drank? The effect produced by alcohol. So you don't sit there and talk about the beer. You talk about the effect. Anybody? When you talk about drinking a zombie, you talk about the effect. Screech, or you talk about the and the effect it produced, right? Anybody? When you do something, you talk about the effect it produces, because you're hoping to get something from it. So the steps are about connecting you to something greater than you, and it's the effect it produces. It's the experience it produces to bring about this change. Because if you don't experience this thing, will you stay here? So it's about the experience this process brings about to create a change sufficient enough that you're comfortable within your own skin and you're at peace with the world around you. That's pretty cool stuff, right? So when we get into the 4th here, what's the purpose of the resentment process? It's to master resentments. We see how our energy gets tied up, and now we're able to reallocate it based on truth and application of ideas. So it doesn't turn on us, right? By self-pity, it's not contained energy. You ever notice when you don't feel good where all the energy stays? It's like your chest is going to blow up. You ever have that? This is saying you don't have to have that energy all compartmentalized within inside of you. You could work toward making it constructive. You could reallocate it to working toward your betterment instead of your demise. In order to do that, you need to learn how to master resentment. So now what you're starting to experience is your connection with a power greater than yourself, because now you're starting to get relief from these things that used to keep you in bondage. Now you're learning to be an observer of your thinking instead of a participant. For the first time, you get to see you are not your thinking, which is pretty cool. And the more you apply this stuff, the more you get separation emotionally from all this stuff that used to happen. Which, ask anybody who's done this 4-step, the way it's laid out here, you get freedom from self. How many people's done the 4-step here and got that freedom? So, you ever sit in a theater with surround sound? Imagine that on full blast to a point where you can hardly, it's almost irritable, that sound. It gives you that, ah. That's what it's like before the 4-step. That's your life live. And you got front row to it. You're sitting there flicking the channels. Whoa. I think that's bad. Watch this. Whoa. Anybody go from one episode to another episode to another episode, and by the time you finish with you, it's like, you need a drink? So this is the first step, is we turn the sound down where you're an observer of what's on the screen. And then the second thing is you start narrating a new story. You start changing the story how you see it. And the old you wants to look at it the old way, but the new you, through this process, looks at it a new way so you can have freedom from this. You can compartmentalize all these things. So 90% of all that stuff you carry is gone. 90% of it. And the other 10% you apply certain prayers to, that when these things crop up, you keep on telling yourself the truth about it instead of going back to how you used to look at it. Anybody find that freedom in here? And if you change the story, you change the outcome, you change how you feel and your attachment to it. It's pretty wild, right? So where we're at now, and this is one of the things that most people miss, and it's pretty wild, is they're saying you've already started this relationship with this power. You don't have to wait till you get to step 12. You're starting to get relief now through this 3rd step prayer and the resentment prayer. Didn't ask you, do you understand it? It says, have you tried it? And are you getting some form of relief? And if the question is yes, I'm getting relief, then you keep doing it. Because you become your own kind of experiment. This seems to work when I do this, and when I don't do it, it seems worse. Does that kind of make sense? It's like walking around with a pebble in your shoe. Anybody ever do that here? We try to get the pebble between our toes and think it's manageable. But you're still walking with a limp. Normal people stop and take the pebble out of their shoe. We go another 2 blocks before I stop, because I'm on holidays, don't want to interrupt anything. You ever walk with something in your shoe? It's like, that's the way we do with manageable problems. It does the same thing. Sorry. Okay, so now about fear. Take the pebble out. Okay.
Where are we?
Next page.
Fear, page 67.
Notice the word fear?
Notice it, yes.
Is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives.
Not some of it, all of it.
It was an evil and corroding thread.
That can't be good, eh? So we can't see it. It's such a part of us, and it's determining how we think, feel, and respond to life. Because when you're instinct-based, you are fear-based. You have to have the fight or flight. You're in a constant anxiety of anticipating something happening. That's what the Neanderthal or the animal or whatever you want to call it, the instinct-based life is. It's the anticipation of constant threat. Right? So would you be anxiety-based if you're always worrying about losing, something happening, something going on? That's why our mind prepares us for the worst possible scenario that could happen in our lives. We feel like it's happening, and what your mind is saying, we've prepared you for it. Anybody think of the most horrific thing that could happen? And even so, when I'm on a non-spiritual basis and I get back to the Neanderthal, I call it the Neanderthal, the instinct-based living, I start thinking of people's death, and it cripples me inside, the anticipation of the loss of these people. And I'm like living it. I'm like almost crying. The phone rings, I got to shut it off to really enhance what I'm feeling. Sorry. Anybody here? And then you're living the whole thing like, how am I going to survive? And you're going to meetings and like it's crazy. And there's nothing happening. How many people have that kind of thinking here? Okay, I'm not alone. Okay, evil and corroding thread. Okay.
The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve.
So reconfirming page 62 and reconfirming page 54. It's below the surface, right? It's something I can't see, feel, and touch, but I feel the effects of it, and it's eating my lunch.
But did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble.
How many people talk themselves out of happiness here because of the fear associated with something? I don't need anybody's help talking me out of happiness. Okay.
We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them.
It's the same thing. You do the third step prayer. You sit quietly and make a list of everything that comes to mind, even if it sounds stupid. Mine, when I got here, was driving over bridges and them collapsing. I used to undo my seatbelt in case it collapsed, like nuts. Like new sobriety. I'm going over, undoing my seatbelt, just getting ready. People were like, what are you doing? Nothing, it's personal. It's nuts. I'd walk by a picket fence and think about tripping and falling on it, right? Being stabbed, being shot at, groups of people. My mind was constantly consumed with the endless possibilities of pain I can endure at any given moment. Anybody else or just me? Okay. Yeah, we're living a dream now. Okay, go ahead. So you make a list, right?
We asked ourselves why we had them.
So what? One of the things is on the inventory sheets here. Now it's the second column. Is it my self-esteem, personal, my social security, sex instinct, and ambitions? A fear is associated with one of those things, and the only time you could feel fear is in the present. And it's an association with one of my instincts, the Neanderthal, right? The gatherer, right? The person who's trying to create happiness within inside of myself by accumulating things, people, places, and things, trying to arrange the lights to keep me secure and happy. Anybody have that life? So what happens is it's based on my instincts. So when I look at these, I see, this is where my fear is coming from. It's because of my self-esteem, my personal relation, my mentor. It's one of these things. And then once you have that all down, then they'll ask you, why do you have them? Go ahead.
Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse.
It's like, anybody have a job and they're going to find you out any day now? So you act a part of the person, and any day they're going to know you're a fraud? Anybody have that kind of thinking? And you're good at your job, but you spend a lot of time thinking somebody's going to find out that you're not. Anybody have that kind of thinking? Okay.
Perhaps there is a better way.
Hope so.
We think so. For we are now on a different basis.
When? Now. Because we made that decision in 3. We thought well before taking this step, making sure we're ready, that we could abandon our course of action for living to adopt a new one. That's what we're making a conscious decision to do this. We're not surrendering. We're not accepting. We're making a conscious decision to incorporate this way of life into our lives. Like, we're not being drafted. We're signing up. I see the benefit of this, living this way of life compared to the life I was living. And I can't obtain this without this connection to source. So now I have access to this. I've experienced it. So now I'm on a different basis. Because I could access these things that start to create change in myself, and I could see where they're coming from based on my instincts, and I could start correcting them at an internal level. And when I correct them at an internal level by the way I think, based on my energy, what will my life start looking like? Better. What will my emotions start looking like? More manageable. The unmanageability they talk about is my inability to change my thinking and my emotional state based on that, and the anxiety it produces, and the conflict I'm in with people, places, and things. Does that kind of make sense? So when you change it at a core level, what starts changing is the reality that I live in and the connection with people, places, and things around me. We're on a different basis now.
The basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role He assigns.
So you hear people say, what's God's will for me? To play the role He assigns. When does the assignment happen? He's the employer, we're His agents. He's the father, we're His children. He's the principals, right? So when does this assignment happen? Now. The only time you can get access to this power, this source, and change is now. Not next week, now. So at any given moment, I could pause, reallocate how I think by accessing this power, and it changes my energy, and it changes my reality, and it changes my interactions with people, places, and things. If I play the role He assigns now, and sometimes it's as simple as doing the dishes. You say, God, what's your will for me? And you're staring at your dishes, and they're touching the ceiling. Do the dishes. I don't know how that's going to help. Try it. If you're at work, what do you think God's will would be for you to do? Stay at work. It can't be that simple. Try it. Okay.
Just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us and humbly rely on Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity.
Is that not the change? So that means there's still going to be noise, but I'm able to find peace in that. So where's this peace that they're talking about when the calamity of the world is knocking on my door? Within. I find that quiet place within inside of me because that's where the refuge is. That's where this source of energy is. If I could find that place within inside of me, I find a... Because if I can't find it, that means I'm instinctual based. If I'm instinctual based, I'm anxiety based. So I need to make the shift within inside of me by the acknowledgement that this is happening by accessing this prayer, whatever it is. Hey, you, or whatever. And as soon as you're back in the moment, it creates a shift in your reality. And then you could ask, what do I need to do now? What's the next right thing? God, help me do the next right thing. It's that simple.
We never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage.
So that means you've changed your belief system. Where you spend your energy is your belief system. And your faith is the believing that when I continue to do this, I'm seeing tangible results. I believe it will continue to change if I continue to do this. So if your belief system changes, so step one is impending doom. Step two is the belief that if I do something different through this course of action, I could have a different experience. Right off the hop is the shifting of ideas and energies that gives you a good feeling that there's hope for you, right? So it's how you spend your belief system. You're going to believe something. Either way, you'll be right.
They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let Him demonstrate through us what He can do. We ask Him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what He would have us be. At once, we commence to outgrow fear.
So what's the recipe that they're trying to teach us now? There's a recipe that they just put in the simplest form. The third, what's the prayer, the 4-step prayer? We just read it. It says, we ask Him to remove our fear. In order to ask to remove something, first you need to acknowledge the presence of it. That means I understand the energy that's consuming me because I'm getting anxiety. So I acknowledge I feel some anxiety, tightness of breath. I'm fear-based. I'm instinct-based. I step back from it, take a breath, and ask God for direction here. I've just shifted my whole energy. I've stepped back. I've moved into a spiritual approach. And then I ask Him what to do. So it talks about fear and direct our attention to what He would have us be. So right away, my shifting goes from here to over here. What's the next right thing to do? Is it set the alarm clock, do the dishes, go to a meeting half an hour beforehand, go find someone to help, go make coffee, stay and help clean up? What can I do to get out of self? Right? And we commence to outgrow fear. You hear people say, oh, we can't have two emotions in the same house. You ever hear people say that? You don't live in my house. Here they're saying, which is, if you really understand it, is really cool. How many people have been crippled by fear here? Just immobilized by it. Here they're saying just the acknowledgement of the ability to stand up and move forward, to have a different response to how I used to respond, is the beginning of something. Going to a meeting before I wouldn't go to a meeting, getting up out of bed, phoning somebody is something different than what I'd normally do. When I'm crippled by fear, I'm immobilized. Anybody? And say, God, give me help. And then you feel, okay, I'm going to go to that meeting, and your brain says, it's not going to help. It's not going to help. You go to a meeting, oh, man, that was so good, that meeting. It's probably the shittiest meeting you've ever been to, but it was so good. Because you're having a different experience. So the recipe is acknowledge, prayer, and redirect. But you need to acknowledge where this fear is coming from. Is it from myself? Social. Is it my security? Is it my sex? Is it my ambition? One of my instincts is crippling me, right? And I need to find a new solution to this. So, God, my prayer was, I don't know who or what you are, but I need some serious help because I'm in serious trouble. I phone my spine. I'm so much fear. He says, what are you doing? I says, I'm sitting down. He says, stand up. I said, why? He says, just stand up. So I stand up. He says, lean forward. Don't move your feet. Just keep leaning forward. He says, is your feet moving? I said, yeah. He says, keep them going to a meeting. So if you move your thought, your head, your feet will start to follow. If you change your thinking, everything will follow. It's the start of it doesn't say it doesn't make sense. It says try it. Right? But you need to know where this stuff comes from. Armed with facts about yourself, an inventory about how you operate, how you function, what you need to apply these things to get relief. Relieve me of the bondage of self and take away my difficulties. The stock and trade is you, how you respond to life. And it's an internal dialogue. It's an internal battle. And if you beat it at the internal level, how is life going to look? You'll match calamity with serenity. Let's close with the serenity prayer. Have the worksheets here. Next week is about sex. You want to get here early? There'll be a slideshow. You can take reserved seating now if you like. But what makes this all possible? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Just try it.